Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, or whatever it is where you are. Second day of new audio interface. Still tinkering with it. Half an hour before the stream, recording myself, tweaking compressors, stuff like that. Hopefully it's a little bit better than it was yesterday. Thanks for joining. Today, we are looking at Hermit. Don't know if the dev is in the stream. Claim that the interface is just a Scarlet, a 4 Scarlet. The one I had before was a something else, the blue one. Now I've got the red one. Just got broken when Streamlabs updated, so who knows. Thanks to everyone who's joined. If you're new to the channel, this is Indie Game Clinic, a variety channel about indie games and how they're made. I try and spend, roughly half of the output of this channel on unreleased games that haven't been finished yet, giving feedback on them, doing kind of what a design consultant would do. You hired a design consultant, except instead of paying me, you go on a really long waiting list, and if you're lucky, then you get a YouTube video at some point. So we don't cover released games on this stream. I do occasionally cover released games on this channel, but this stream is a feedback stream for people doing works in progress. Today we are looking at... Get well soon, Claim. Today we are looking at Hermit. And I'm quite excited for this one, and I told some of you about that yesterday, but we'll kind of look at why that is in a minute. I'm just going to check that it's downloaded while I'm yapping. But I think this might be a good use case to talk about some different, or a good kind of case study to talk about some different topics. I'm just going to read what the dev sent me. So, love the channel. Hope you'll consider providing feedback on the game. This is a solo developed project. It uses some marketplace assets, licensed music, etc. Okay, doesn't use generative AI. Okay, the Steam, there's an open beta on Steam. I'm gathering feedback to help improve the game and fix issues, and thought it might be a good timing to also submit it here. It's a heavily cut down version of the main game, and it's its own little open world experience. Separate areas, separate quests, intended to throw people directly into the action and tutorial without the backstory elements present in the main game, which takes some time to go through. Okay, cool. I would avoid doing that anyway. If you think of like the successful ones of these, Souls games don't have much backstory before you get to just learn and play the game. Skyrim doesn't have any, apart from you're on a wagon and now you've escaped. The demo should be fully playable, but there are also some unfinished elements or known issues I'm already aware of. Input configurations need streamlining, too many interact keys. Okay, books cannot be read without first picking them up. Control remapping is not yet available. Vendor buy-sell prices are the same. Okay. Perk skills are a planned feature, but I want to do them right well. And as a result, they aren't implemented yet for the demo beta. That's interesting. I mean, we'll see how much that feels like a missing element, because this is an RPG, right? So we need to be able to invest XP in something. That's a really kind of vital part of what makes something mechanically feel like an RPG. Some known issues with AIs getting stuck on retaining walls around roads. Also, hopefully to be patched later this week. Okay, cool. So that was, I don't know when that was submitted. Could have been months ago. So there's a few things there. Let's talk about the game specifically, and then I'm going to talk about the genre and what my expectations are when I come to this genre, and we'll talk about the Steam page, and then we'll open up the game and play it. So I've set aside 2 hours for this game today. We're not just going to be reviewing the game, we're going to be reviewing the Steam page generally, and we're going to talk about some of the genre stuff that comes up from this game. So my kind of first impressions of this, when I look at the Steam page, are that like I really like the fantasy that is being sold in. I can't kind of zoom in on Steam like you can on the web. In this capsule image, this is a very specific type of fantasy. This is kind of what they were doing with Skyrim. It's like 80s dark fantasy, sword and sorcery type stuff, right? It's like Conan, but maybe a bit more Norse and a bit less wherever Conan is supposed to be based on, right? Seeing this guy, sort of like druidic looking shamanic guy with a skull on his head and whatever this demon type thing over there. It's pulling on particular types of fantasy. And my first impression when I come to this page is, okay, I really like the capsule art because it speaks to me. It's very kind of heavy metal. It's doing, and I think this is a general point about fantasy in general and sci-fi really. If you're making a game that is fantasy or sci-fi, what is the specific flavor of that thing you're giving? Because like massive IPs like Warcraft can sustain loads of different types of fantasy in the same world, right? Warcraft has a silly kind of Harry Potter magical steampunk area, and then it has a heavy metal frozen skeletons area and all of that kind of stuff. It's a big IP, and that means that big IP can hold all of these different subgenres. Same with Fallout. Fallout has cowboy stuff. It has 1950s casinos and gangsters and private eyes, and it has like Warhammer 40k Marines in big robot suits type stuff, and it all blends together. And that kind of quirky mix of things is what makes that work, but they can only do it because it's a big IP. What I see immediately on this page is that this is sort of classical medieval, and this is Norse, right? So immediately when I come onto this page, the fantasy that is pulling me in from this capsule art doesn't feel totally at a peace with this. And so I immediately feel a little bit of disappointment because this looks more like generic medieval fantasy, whereas this is pulling on a very specific kind of rough, rugged, Nordic black metal fantasy, right? And I think that's an important thing to acknowledge first from the kind of narrative design, creative direction side of things. The world building I can see in this video doesn't match up with, I mean, it's totally reasonable that this guy here might live in this world, right? I'm not saying that he doesn't seem like he fits in. I'm saying that as the top of the marketing funnel, this capsule art is telling me that this is going to be focused on a particular type of fantasy, right? Like morally grey, shamanic, living in a cave dudes fighting demons, like bad guys fighting bad guys type thing. And then when I come to here, it looks much more kind of Mountain Blade. And some of that is down to just simple choices like the types of hats and helmets you get. This guy with the little, this guy looks like the Snufkin from Moomins, right? So this guy and this guy, I can imagine them hanging out together. You know, this is like the woodsman that lives on the edge of civilization, and occasionally he goes to this guy's house, the skull hat guy who lives up in the mountains, and they smoke some weed together. That's believable. This guy and this guy go together. But when I see the kind of like Oliver Cromwell ass dudes like this isn't evoking the same type of fantasy as this. And if you think of the way that Skyrim was marketed, it was there's a famous story that what's his face, Todd Howard had like a Conan toy in his office, and he would jokingly say that it was the game design document for Skyrim. And obviously it's not. It's more like a kind of creative direction tool to say, this is the fantasy we're selling. You're like a muscle dude that is walking around in the snow slaying stuff. But if you think of how Skyrim was marketed, it was dude with fantasy Viking helmet on mountains on the front cover. And that wasn't the only thing you could do in it. It wasn't the only thing you could be in it. You could be like part of the Roman Legion, or you could be a magical ninja, all of these things. But it did tell you about the specific kind of cultural setting that most of the game took place in. And I really think there's a disjunct between these two things. And it's not that the capsule art's not good and the game is not good, but I think that the capsule art is going to capture a particular type of person, and then when that type of person goes swirly whirly round the marketing funnel into the game and onto the Steam page, a lot of the people that are attracted to this sort of thing are maybe not going to be as attracted to this, because it's a different appeal. This is a different type of guy to this type of guy, and I can't actually see any screenshots where we can be this type of guy. So let's move on from like first kind of visual stuff to what it says here. Hermit is a hardcore third-person, open-world fantasy RPG set in a rich and dynamic world. Explore with your donkey at your side as you navigate dungeons, cast spells, brew potions, hunt monsters, and traverse a vast medieval landscape while uncovering the terrible secrets of the Order of Hermits. So this is well-written marketing copy. I think this is totally fine. The things I like here is like, okay, there's about 50% of this that is just generic, which is okay. It's like very clearly, if you like Skyrim or The Witcher, you'll probably like this. I particularly like explore with your donkey at your side because it gives a bit more specificity. The other thing I like about the title and this idea of the Order of Hermits is it's narrowing it down. And if you think about what a demo is meant to achieve, or even with early playtesting, one of the ways I think about it is when you are trying to launch a game, the demos that you put out and everything you put out to show people needs to kind of answer a question for the audience. And for me, like, this isn't like some game design genius thing. This is just normal player interacting with games on Steam, right? When I see a indie developed, whether it's solo or small team or whatever, if I see a game like this, a game that is supposed to be a lush 3D detailed world, I sort of that immediately throws up red flags for me, because I've been burnt so many times by these games. You see endless video essays on YouTube that are like, this game is the next Elder Scrolls, this indie game is the next Dark Souls or whatever, and then you play it and it's just not up to scratch with those things. They'll call it like a Skyrim killer or whatever, and then you play it and it just doesn't feel anywhere near as polished. So one of the ways that you can counter that is to make your game much more clear, much narrower in what it's trying to do. And an example of that in an RPG would be to narrow down the kind of type of guy you are in this world, right? So instead of it being a game where you can be a wizard or a rogue or a fighter or different types of fighter, an armor fighter or a barbarian, instead maybe you go down the route of it's an RPG where you're only a wizard, or it's an RPG where you're only an assassin, that kind of thing. That to me would be answering that question, because I always come to these types of games with a deal of skepticism. That isn't like any kind of expertise thing. It's just as a gamer, I come to these type of games with a level of skepticism, and that means the developer needs to answer that with something. And I think some of the things that work for it here is this idea that there's an Order of Hermits. So it's starting to narrow it down to like, you're either part of or you're investigating this arcane order. And that starts to push it in the direction of like, this is maybe a smaller game with a bit more of a focused story and theme. And so we're not like, oh, you can be anyone, do anything type thing. And that to me is actually quite appealing in a smaller indie game, because it lets me know that it's not trying to have the same level of content variety as like a Bethesda RPG, which would be generally a bad idea. It would be a bad idea with a team of 10 people, let alone with a team of 1. So that's kind of all of my first impressions that I get from the Steam page and everything I've been told about the game so far. I'm just going to check the chat and then we'll actually boot the game up. I'm just going to move my camera down a bit so we can see the bottom of the chat over here. How long has the dev been working on this? Not sure. The capture reminds me of Far Cry Primal. Yeah, exactly. There's a disjunct here. It's like a lot of the choices feel like it is classic medieval fantasy. You know, we're seeing dudes that look like they're from between the 12th and 15th century. But this is more of a kind of Bronze Age fantasy type thing. And you could imagine this guy coexisting in a fantasy world with more quote-unquote civilized or advanced people. But we're setting this up as like the cool hero image for the game, right? So I don't want to be a guy in shiny armor when I click on this marketing. I want to be a dirty guy that speaks to the trees, That's kind of what this is, the fantasy that this is pulling on as a hero image. Yeah, and the thing is, when I say Norse, it doesn't have to be explicitly Norse. I think what I'm getting at is less medieval and more pre-medieval, right? Because, we'll spend a little bit longer on this because, if we go sword and sorcery movies, this is the kind of fantasy that image conjures up, right? It is low armor, low technology. It is, you know, this kind of thing we get with Conan, and it is kind of heroes that aren't really heroic. It is like moral grayness, might makes right, and magic is this kind of dark, earthy thing that is more associated with kind of witchcraft and druidism and things like traditions like Wicca and Norse mythology and all of that kind of stuff, rather than it being like something that you learn at a wizard university where everyone wears a pointy hat. It's a subgenre of fantasy, and I don't think Norse is necessarily the thing, but this guy is pulling on that subgenre, which is not the same as high fantasy, as medieval kind of, you know, mid-Europe, medieval, shiny armor fantasy. It's a different thing. Yeah, exactly. We expect it to be kind of more grim based on this, at a bare minimum. And of course, there's going to be people that like all sorts of fantasy and they don't care about this disjunct. But one of the things about a Steam page is just understanding it as a marketing funnel, right? A marketing funnel is any time where you're getting a bunch of people going, hey, look at this. And then that bunch of people is gradually getting smaller and smaller until the group of people that make a purchase. And the Steam capsule art is at the top of that funnel, right? So that is going to go out to the largest amount of people. Then some percentage of those people will click through to the page, and an even smaller percentage of people will wishlist the game, and an even smaller percentage of people will buy the game. And if the capsule image doesn't line up thematically with the game, or it lines up in a way that is antithetical to the appeal of the game, then that marketing funnel is going to be slightly broken. And that's a shame, because I think the game itself looks cool. The capsule art looks cool. I don't think they look cool in the same way. And this is what creative direction is, right? This is making sure things about your project, whether it's in the game itself or in the external materials, line up and have the same sort of appeal. Welcome to the Hermit demo. The game demo is just a small fraction of the size and content of the main game. Let me just turn my capture. There we go. I didn't have my mic set up properly on my no cam channel. Bugs are expected. Still in development. If you do encounter a bug, please report form from the and you let me know how you should. This is great. I'm a big fan of campsite in a fantasy game, but it's doing a moment within a scale world. And this is giving us those flavors, right? Okay. To me, this lines very, very well with the capsule art. Ram is kill. So what I'm going to do to get around that issue, I'll restart the demo, change the specs, and then we'll go to character creation, because I was not going to be able to talk through character creation with that issue. I can't actually see it on my end, but I will try and fix it. Let's go. Okay. I'm going to just put everything on low, and then we'll see if we can go up from there. And it didn't look any different. I think I've mentioned this on the channel before, but I would always advise people to have your defaults to lower, because part of it's logical. We just went through this with Dirt World. If you have the defaults to high and people load up the game and they can't play it and they can't even get to the menu to turn them down, they're going to think, what the hell? And they're not going to make their computer the problem, because their initial interaction with the game is that it's not working. Whereas if you set the defaults to sort of medium low, and then when they load the game, they go, oh, this doesn't look very good. I'll see if I can turn the graphics up. And then that makes the game slow. They're not going to feel as bad, because the change in quality has happened as a result of their actions rather than being the default when they load up the game. So if you're making a game that is resource intensive, which my 2D platformer somehow is, because, hey, game maker, set the defaults to medium low. And then if people load it up and go, oh, this looks a bit rubbish, they can turn it up. And then if it balks their computer, they're more likely to psychologically blame their computer than they are to blame the game. We can be a lady. I think we're gonna be a bog witch. I'm gonna be an old lady. Yeah, bog witch. You can choose a little... Oh, this is neat. So they give us a little kind of character portrait that's reasonably neutral. Okay. You can choose the hairstyle, but not the color. Good. We can choose the kind of skin color to some degree. You might want a medium in there just so, you know, because this is very much like, that's not what a person of African heritage looks like, but at least there's the choice. But just having light or dark and no medium means that people from like Arabic or Asian backgrounds are not going to feel represented by this choice, which matters. Don't at me about it. I don't care. Okay, we'll be a young witch with grey hair, because that's cool. Maybe she's not really young. Maybe she just looks that way because she casts spells on herself all day. I'm going to be called Griselda. We're going to be like the girl version of the dude in the capsule art. That's the goal here. Bogatha, that's a good name. Okay. Press B to equip the backpack. So this is fun because the tooltip on the backpack is telling me a bunch of things. Yeah, and then there's a separate one in the world. Okay, read the plaque. Backpacks are your personal inventory. Backpacks have limited space, but larger backpacks can be purchased, found, or crafted. Approach a backpack and press B to equip it. Press I to access your inventory while wearing it. This is a very nicely made interface. I don't have any qualms with it. I like that we've got a sort of a highlight system as well. Here's a backpack. We're doing a grid-based inventory. We can rotate items. I'm a bit of a sicko for this type of stuff. I like a bit of inventory management. Oh, how do I equip it? Equip it. Okay, this is all very easy to use from the get-go, so no issues there. Bit blurry, which is weird because it looks like some sort of post-processing effect that I thought I'd turned everything off. Typography in the interface needs a little bit of work. Looks very default. Those button prompts as well, just a bit fugly. Yeah, can we turn the motion blur off? Because I don't. Yeah. It's sort of like it's triggering all the time rather than when we do a fast motion, you know, which is not really motion blur, it's just global blur. Feels too sensitive to actually do what a motion blur is meant to do, which is kind of highlight when things are moving. Logbook. Press Q to highlight objects that you can interact with. For example, you can use it to find food in containers. And we can cook. That's nice. Okay, so we've got, this is like an old school CRPG thing. Kind of eagle vision on interactables. I don't hate it. We've got a pickle. The pickle says we're really in a pickle now as the flavor text. I'm a big fan of that. What's over here? What's on? Oh, I thought someone had left some lovely meat on the floor, but it was just some pottery. Yeah, I think chat is universally agreed, unilaterally agreeing upon motion blur not being a default as well. I think here it's just a bit too extreme. It's like I'm not doing it. It should be there, like, you know, like speed lines in a comic. You know, when things are going fast and combat is happening, that's when I want to see some sexy motion blur. I don't want to see it when I'm just walking around doing basic stuff because it's weird. It's like it's trying to create a feeling that doesn't belong in the scene, you know. So there's in game studies you have the idea of ilinx, which is the pleasure that humans get from vertigo and being swirled and whirled around, like you're on a, like when you're on a roller coaster or something like that. And I associate motion blur with that. But this is not an ilinx moment, you know? We're not flying a magic carpet, we're not fighting a dragon, we're not whooshing around, so that's when you don't need your motion blur. You are hungry? Do not forget to eat something. Okay, mum. Eat some stew. I think this is a tiny controls thing, but I opens the inventory and escape close it. I would also like I to close the inventory once you've got it up. Because sometimes you want to just look at your inventory and then close it immediately again, like just see what's in there. Voltage. Pick up arrows. Yeah, don't mind if I do. Stealth archer time. Do I have a stealth archer button? The longbow is a useful tool. Not only is it a bow, it is also long. It can be used for hunting or as a weapon, but in a pinch, it can also be used to shoot levers and other triggers from a distance. That's the good stuff. Give me that sim shooting a lever with a arrow nonsense. I'm all in for it. Unlike melee weapons, a longbow requires ammunition. You must have arrows in your backpack to load the bow. With the bow unholstered, press right mouse button to load an arrow. Then you can press and hold right mouse button to charge the bow. Once the bow is charged, release right mouse button to fire. If the bow is not sufficiently charged, the shot will be cancelled. Enemies take more damage from bows if they are shot while unsuspecting. For example, idle, patrolling, etc. Versus if they have detected you. Arrows can be picked up for a short time after being fired so that they can be reused. Take that vase. Picked up some anti-venom. Tab for inventory is the way. Yeah, it's a good idea. I think both. I would have tab and I both. It's difficult, isn't it? Because you know, you probably just want one button for things if you've got a rebinding system, but I think before you've got that, you probably want to set up multiple things so that it's intuitive for people and then see what people use. Why am I here? Why am I in this place? See, the dev said that there's going to be some sort of introductory story, but I'm quite happy just wandering around in a dungeon and finding out why I'm here later. I don't know about you guys, but I'm totally fine with that. As long as we've got some interesting stuff to do. Because the thing about, I mean, the thing with story in games is it's a whole other skill set, and someone who is able to build everything we've seen in this game so far may be an atrocious storyteller because they haven't cut their teeth writing fan fiction about, you know, Buffy and Willow or whatever, which is how you get good at storytelling. And I'm saying that partially as a joke, but I mean, nearly every narrative designer you meet in games will probably have started out doing something cringe and nerdy like that. So I usually want a situation where I can get invested in the game as just a pure gameplay thing before the game starts foisting its story on me. Because that way, if the story is bad and if the writing is bad, I might already be invested enough in the gameplay to not care that the writing is bad. And the thing is, with a solo developed project like this, where the developer is trying to do so many things at once, if the writing is really crucial to the success of the project and they can't write, then we've got a problem, right? So I would minimize the need for good writing, or at least minimize how much you're beating people over the head with it as soon as they open the game, because, you know, that's just a matter of like being aware of what you're good at, which, you know, it's kind of one of the mantras of this channel. So if you want to make good games, you probably can't make a game with everything in it because you're probably not good at everything. And that's not a harshness, it's just a reality of how human beings and their proficiencies work. You know, if the fantasy RPG genre tells us anything, it's that you can't put points in everything. Which is why I'm paying someone else to program half of my game, because I'm good at drawing and yapping and having silly ideas and programming certain types of things, but if I have to program an interface, I just immediately start to cry because I didn't put my RPG stat points in interface math. Gnagnahead is good at everything, which is good. It's good to be good at everything. It's good to be good at everything. I just think it's foolish to assume that you're good at everything or capable of being everything, because Occam's razor says you're much more likely to be a what's it called, Dunning-Kruger case, than you are actually as good at all the things as you think you are, right? I take a lot of my game dev inspiration from Prince, the artist formerly known as Prince and then known as Prince again. who was really good at 2 things, kind of okay at loads of other things, but then, you know, got other people to do the other things when it mattered. I don't want to go in there. Can I jump? Is it just a... Does it hurt us? Oh yeah, it does. It's icky. Did I come at that from the wrong direction? I mean, I could just sort of danger roll through it and it didn't hurt me anyway, so... Okay, so I was supposed to come around from that side. Now, I'm not a realism guy, but when your graphics look like this... Oh, I died. I'm not a realism person, but when the graphics like this look like this, it starts to raise expectations of like the world working in a logical way. So that puzzle needs like a drain on the floor so that we know why that happened, because there wasn't one. And I know that's really pernickety and small stuff, but if you're going to set this kind of visual standard for your game, then things need to make sense in a particular way, and that's why I would never make a game that looks this realistic. Because you're raising expectations of every part of the game then. I'm not sure why I died then. I think maybe I starved, but I don't know. It wasn't very clear. No room in it. Oh, I died and now I don't have a bag. Okay, so dying doesn't... Are we doing a corpse run? Dying doesn't restart you from where you were. Okay, let's go and see if we have a quick... let's go back to a quick save. See what happens. Oh, I was poisoned from the... Oh, okay. I walked through the poison. I was poisoned by the poison. Yeah. So it wasn't obvious when we were poisoned. That was the issue there. So there is a little buff thing there showing me I'm poisoned. Okay, I'm going to use my anti-venom. I don't know if that icon changed because it's still green. Potion of fast movement. Sausage. I eat a pickle. I am Griselda, eater of the pickle. I am here to walk around in the dark. I think... So, not a level design expert, but I think this may be a little bit too non-linear for an opening section. And I think one of the best exercises you could do here is go back and play the opening dungeons for some Bethesda games. And look at how they're kind of linear in a way that makes them not seem to be linear, because they're very linear, and that's the sort of thing that people complain about. But if you don't do it, then they complain about it more, or they just stop playing the game. So I feel like I'm getting lost quite a bit in this, and I like getting lost in games, but I don't like getting lost in the first 10 minutes of the game, because then it suggests that it's a bug rather than a feature, right? So make your entry point for your game relatively idiot-proof. And then let people get lost later on, when getting lost is cool, because you actually care enough about the game to want to get unlost and to explore and stuff. Early on in the game... So I feel like these arrows are only needed because the level design here is too non-linear. If the level design was more linear and just didn't let you go the wrong way, then we wouldn't have a problem. The other thing is that everything is like the same tone of lighting and the same wall textures all the way through, and that's not a visual variety problem. That is a issue of like navigation. If every part of your thing looks the same, you know, you can always kind of imagine dungeons as like a 5-room dungeon in a D&D campaign, where you have to describe things verbally, right? The first room is a small, cramped, dry room full of skeletons. The second room is a wet room with lots of chains on the walls, right? So you describe the things verbally before you actually build the level. And then when you build the level, the player's kind of cognitive mapping for navigating the level becomes a lot easier because the rooms actually have a theme rather than looking like variations on the same thing. Oh, it's gone off on the... Keep losing the green copy. 1 sec. We went outside. We're outside now. Right, I don't need... I've lost my bow. I've lost my bow. There's a dram gun. I don't have an easy way to unequip things. And I'm walking around with my torch like an idiot. I'm gonna have to drop my torch. I don't have a... Right, we're gonna go to the help... Well, how do I get to the help screen? Find a way out of the catacombs. We've done that. We've got quest items. Demo map. This is kind of nice. There's a squiddly diddly over there. But again, this looks more like a clean medieval illustration done by a monk. It's kind of giving more of that than an earlier thing like we get from the what's it? The Steam capsule. Oh, I do have a bow. Okay. So I've got a character sheet. Is that C? Is there a shortcut to go to the character sheet? I'm trying to find... Skill tree. Extreme Gust spellcasting. Windward Scream spell deals significantly more stability damage to enemies. Don't have any points. Did I take off my backpack? That's a very personal question. I did, yeah. Equip. Why is it always dragon? Why is it always castle? A trebuchet. Yeah, I feel like the arrows are sort of like more necessary than they need to be because of some other choices that are made here. I'm glad that you've put the stuff in to help the player, but I think if you have kind of good level design and good visual design, then you shouldn't have to do it so much. Not back in here again. Torch. Yeah, Tim in the chat said, why would you not just play Skyrim if you wanted to do fantasy in the snow? Which I sort of... hard not to agree there. Maybe the Hermit on the capsule art is a bad guy, and that's what we're doing. It's like the equivalent of having Darth Vader on the front of a Star Wars thing. But I don't know. We've got a dodge roll. That's cool. I will pick up the rusty stock. I will read the plaque. Equip a weapon and prepare for combat. Can I hold a sword and a light? Right click to block and parry. Middle mouse to do an alternate heavy attack. Left click to attack. Press Z to holster and unholster. Press O to rotate weapon in hand and change damage types. You can still throw torches with a weapon equipped by pressing T. Okay, so we can throw torches down on the ground. That's neat as well. I like that. So, I get my sword. I go choppity chop. Then I press T. Oh. And it goes back. Where's my sword gone now? Come on. Okay, if I press up and down on the keys, it switches between my 3 equips. But the S-Dock seems to be a one-handed weapon, so I'm not totally sure why I can't have the torch in my hand with the sword. Feels a bit stinky. Oh no. The swinging knife corridor. So it tutorialized... Oh, I'm blocking with the bow, am I? That's confusing. I've got the bow in my hand, but it seems to only be for blocking. Undead Librarian is a good idea for a first enemy, though, because that sort of naturally seems like a weak thing. The Order of Hermits are a deeply misunderstood and villainized group. Historically speaking, hermits have been viewed as dangerous outlaws, and their practice of magical extraction is banned within the Eastern Continent by the Decree on Hermits, which forbids extracting magically endowed powers from animals or people. The well-known and officially sanctioned reasons for this law is known to all, that hermits during the Great Uprising murdered human magic wielders to seize their power through extraction of body parts. Through their practice, they were able to transfer this power to themselves and thus wield all manners of magic at once. This gruesome practice is based in fact, yet it is not the main reason for their ostracism. Many, including the etc, etc, etc. So one thing I would think here about writing is a way that you can make this more interesting is through knowledge gaps. Screw it, let's get really highbrow. So there is a thing in narrative theory that comes from Roland Barthes, who is a French guy that is used in like media studies and cultural studies and stuff, and he talks about like codes that are put into a media text or a story. And by codes he just means like different kind of devices, different ways that a film or a book can do a thing. And the two ones that we use most in film studies are action codes and enigma codes. And an action code is where something happens or when the story tells you something, and an enigma code is when the story sets up a mystery for you to think about that doesn't resolve yet. It might resolve later through an action code. And the interplay between these things is really helpful to think about if you're making a game with a story, because you're trying to balance these two things. It's like creating mystery and answering some of the players' questions. Creating mystery and answering some of the players' questions. It's a bit like show don't tell, but there's a bit more to it. It's about basically, if your game is all enigma and all mystery, or your story is all enigma and all mystery, it will be nonsensical because the player is just answering questions all the time and never getting anywhere in understanding anything. If it's all action and telling the player, then it becomes dull because the story is all happening on the screen and none of it is happening in the player's head. So you want to create an interplay between these two forces of like kind of obviousness and telling people stuff, and mystery and making them question stuff. And when I read this, it's telling us everything. So the way I would rewrite this as a sort of, you know, I've done bits of writing for games, but the way I would rewrite this to make it more inherently interesting is to take the explanation of extraction out and just write it as implication, right? So instead of saying exactly what extraction is, just talk about how bad and scary it is and how awful it is, and let the specificity happen in the player's mind, right? Let the player wonder about what's scary. H.P. Lovecraft did this all the time, you know, classic horror writer. H.P. Lovecraft would like tell you something that was really terrible and then not like physically describe it in a way that allowed you to actually get a proper picture of it, and that made it scarier. It's a similar effect to like in the old Resident Evil games where there's a monster off screen and the camera won't move to show you the monster and you're like and you're just firing blindly into the corner. It's the same kind of psychological setup. So if you want hermits to sound scary, and if you want this thing of extraction to sound scary, which is, you know, a hermit catches a magical beast like a unicorn or some fairy or something, and is through some practice that sounds potentially like malicious and torturous and cruel, is extracting their magic from them and using it for their own ends. If you want that to sound evil and scary and nasty, don't tell us so much about it. So we imagine this character Hans Lomsky. Hans Lomsky is writing a polemic against the hermits and saying that they are bad, and well, no, he's not actually, because he says they're deeply misunderstood and villainized, right? So I'm going to read more of this, but I'm just telling you why, on the first page of this, my response to this as a player, no, not as any sort of expert, as a player, my response to this is that this is bad writing. And it's not bad writing. It's just like first draft bad writing of like, too much of this is obvious. Right, so let's go through this. So we're setting up the character, the author character, Hans Lomsky, as being sympathetic to the hermits because there's this deeply misunderstood and villainized, right? The well-known and officially sanctioned reason for this law is known to all, that hermits during the Great Uprising murdered human magic wielders to seize their power through extraction of body parts. Through their practice, they were able to transfer this power to themselves and thus wield all manners of magic at once. Okay, so the like in-world text we're trying to create here is pushing in different directions, because Hans Lomsky seems to be sympathetic to hermits, but he's using the emotive language of murdered human magic wielders, right? So if this is supposed to be a text that is sympathetic to hermits and we want to make it interesting to players, I would downplay how evil what they did was, right? And make this sound more like a piece of propaganda of like, oh, you know, people have said all this awful stuff about hermits, but what they did wasn't even that bad. It's pushing in two different directions. Let's look at the next page now. Many, including this gruesome practice, is based in fact, yet it is not the main reason for their ostracism. Many, including the monarchy, are guilty of murders, and what little we know from history tells us that hermits mainly source magic from wild animals and monsters rather than people. Speaking from my position at the University of Eastmark, I have observed that the rightful king of this land is but a figurehead. The real ruling class, the mages at King's Court and in the city-states, control much of the real day-to-day operations of this kingdom. Those typical humans with no such prowess remain as peasants, workers, slaves, and even kings, yet the fact that hermits themselves are non-magical by nature, but were able to wield powers even beyond those counts and nobles, posed a grave threat to their continued control of the East. Worse so is the fact that the legendary helmets of yore were simple peasants who, through their own cunning, nearly managed to wipe out the modern civilized structure of our Eastern monarchy across all city-states. For this reason, the mere threat of hermit magic poses an enormous existential threat to the real ruling class of the city-states in Eastmark. Those state-sponsored works, like that of my college Gunter Brau, seek to reinforce a fear of hermits in the populace so that none would attempt to break free of the oppressed classes and rise to reclaim their freedoms. Is that the last? Okay. You know, it gets better as it goes on, but I would do okay, so what we're trying to do here is this paragraph is supposed to be Hans presenting the normal story so that he can push back against it. So the well-known and officially sanctioned reason for this law is known to all, that hermits during the Great Uprising murdered human magic wielders to seize their power through their extraction of body parts. Through their practice they were able to transfer this power to themselves and thus wield all manners of magic at once. If you want this to sound more like Hans presenting someone else's story that he doesn't agree with, I would use words like allegedly, or like halfway through use the restate, as the story goes, da 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 da. This gruesome practice is based in fact. The practice isn't what's based in fact. The story about the practice is what's based in fact, right? This gruesome tale is based in fact, and these practices are real, but blah, 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 right? There's kind of a good base for something here. It just needs another draft. And this is one of the reasons why at the start I was saying, if you're a solo developer making a game and you want to tell a story, make a game that is mostly storytelling. And if you want to make an action game, make a game that is mostly action, because a game with all of these parts is not a single person project. And if you enjoy doing this and you enjoy doing this writing, then fine, but you're going to be working on this game for like 5-10 years until it kind of reaches the standard people would expect from a game with all of these things in. And that's the real problem with making a game of this kind of scope. It's not that you can't do it, and I think that's the kind of push back against the kind of make small of games advice that a lot of people feel. It's like, oh, you just don't believe in me. It's like, no, you can do it. You probably can do it, but it's going to take you so much work to get every part of it up to that, up to the right level of quality that people will want to play it, But, I sort of just, I have strong feelings about video game writing, and I often feel that like it is better to have no writing than to have bad writing. And that wasn't bad writing. First impression wasn't good, but it is going to need more drafts. And if there's going to be like dozens and dozens of those books in this game, then it's like a whole job for another person, I'm going to I'm going to putting Vulture in timeout for the rest of the stream because I don't want people advocating the use of GPTs even if they're joking. If you can't make a game without using the water wasting bad content creation machine, then don't make a game. Make a different game that doesn't require that. I can't be bothered with these people. If you think, oh, I need to use ChatGPT because I can't afford a person to do that job. Well, make a project that doesn't require that skill then. Oh, I can't do the art for my game. I need to use ChatGPT. I can't do the writing for my game. I need to. Well, make a different game then. Make a game that doesn't require you to do that. I'm just sick of it. I'm on a budget. Yeah, I don't care. Like I've been paying a programmer to make the bits of my game that I can't make for like the last few months. We set a budget at the start of the month and I say, this is how many hours I can afford for you this month. Since I went full-time on this channel, and like, obviously very, very blessed to have this channel and to have people contributing on Patreon for me making video essays and podcasts and stuff like that. Wouldn't change it for the world. Very, very blessed. But I'm still making less money than I did in my first year of university teaching, right? I'm nearly 40, got a PhD, with 10 years industry experience. I'm making roughly the same amount of money doing this as a high school teacher. And I know that that's good by most people's standards. It's like, oh, you're making a decent living on YouTube. That's great. But it's not really enough to be someone's employee and be paying them to do stuff. I still do it because that's the game I've decided to make, and that's how to make it properly. And a lot of the time when people say I can't afford someone to do this, that, or that, or the other, it's like, put aside, you know, however much you make, put aside 10% of your earnings into a separate account, and then let that accrue over time. And then at some point you're going to need to hire someone to do something else for you, and you're going to go, hey, I've actually got $300. Where did that come from? But the thing is, you treat it like a hobby, and then you expect the outcome to be professional. You expect the outcome to be like a commercial product that someone will be happy to spend money on, but you don't want to spend any money in the first place. And the solutions, the actual kind of ethical, sensible solutions, both in terms of what's good for other people and good for the environment and produces a better game, are just set up a secondary bank account, put $10 in it every week, and then when you need to pay someone, pay them. And if the job that you have for someone else to do is too big, then that's a problem of your own project management and scoping and choosing what to make. If your aspiration is just to make, you know, high fidelity action games, get really good at one of those skills and then apply for jobs in studios that make that. Don't make the choice to do that all on your own and then complain when people don't like the fact that you're pouring slop into your game because you bit off more than you could personally chew. You know, I will never accept that. Oh, I don't have any money. Oh, you're just people who use AI do it because they need to. You don't need to. You don't need to make a game. You certainly don't need to make a game that's completely outside of your own skill set and then like bolster your inability to do the things you've decided to do with like a technology that is literally leading to water shortages in the world at this moment in time. And I'm sick of discussing it. It's like, it's so obviously bad, and because you can't directly see the bad things that are happening, and a lot of it is Dunning-Kruger stuff, right? The people who are okay with writing being done by ChatGPT or art being done by ChatGPT, it's because your taste is so bad in that specific medium or that sub-discipline that you can't see that the output is shit. And then it's like you're just ending up with a worse thing than if you tried to learn the skill yourself, or if you'd outsourced it, or if you just had enough sense in the first place to not try and do something that is way outside of your skill set. You know, I would not try and make a game like this, because even if I could get all the art assets from someone else, I wouldn't be able to manipulate them in a way that would make something that looks this good. So I just don't, you know, go near certain things. Anyway, my rage is now making it very hard to work out how to use this cooking pot. I can make a vegetable soup with a carrot and a potato. I can actually make that, so let's make that. I have every sympathy for people trying to do ambitious things. I don't have any sympathy for people trying to do ambitious things and then playing the pity card of like, oh, but I can't do it all on myself. Well, so you chose to do that thing, you know? I'm trying to see who that is in the chat. I can't see. Oh, it's Sean. Yeah. I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of it. And I'm sick of, you know, I posted yesterday about the people submitting games that weren't their own, and I said to someone in that thread that a lot of the time when I post that, people are going, oh, no one's going to read this. It's like, I'm not posting it for the people who do the wrong thing. I'm posting it to reinforce the ethos of the channel for the people who actually read those things, right? So when I post a thing that says, oh, don't do this, it's bad, you know, we have an ethos where we don't do that, we do this. I'm not doing that because I think the people who did the bad thing are going to read it and follow suit. I'm doing it to reinforce the channel ethos for everyone else. So like everything I just said, I don't expect to change the opinion of the person who made that comment in the chat. Okay, so back to the game. One of the things I just noticed, we've got like, in this interface, my expectation when I see this interface is that I can click an item and drag it over here and put it in the saddlebag. But there doesn't seem to be a way to do that. When I click on stuff, it just drops it on the floor. So, left control and click to quick transfer means I can put stuff in the saddlebag. So I'm going to put everything that I'm not using right now. Except for potions, because we keep our potions on our person. That's the... We can pet the donkey. Sean said so many creative walls that people hit when building a form of media often come from not consuming enough of that form of media, i.e. people are bad at writing because they don't read. Yeah, absolutely, preach. Even people that make like relatively trashy media are experts in reading and analysing like harder media than that. If you read anything that Stephen King ever wrote about writing, you know, Stephen King writes, I think people consider Stephen King a decent writer, but he writes what is relatively lowest common denominator in terms of content. But his aspirations are like very, very like highbrow literary ones, right? And even, you know, I was talking to someone yesterday who works on the, like, did narrative design on like Love Island games, right? And it's not like, that's not like the only thing that that person ever aspires to do with their writing career, but it's kind of like the thing that like every graphic designer you meet has probably made a fast food menu at some point, right? Even if you want to make relatively simple stuff, you need to like really kind of learn the craft of that thing. Yeah, I mean, part of the reason why I'm being so anti-AI as well is that I set this channel up because I wanted to showcase things that people were making and like show them to the world and use them to talk about game design and stuff. And if half of it isn't you, then what's the point? You know, what even is the point? If you want to do that, then fine, put it out into the market and see what happens. But I can't give feedback on something like... The thing with this is, like, these are all art assets that someone else has made, and then the dev has made choices using those art assets. And that means the dev can make different choices using those art assets. But if the art assets came from the pseudo-random nonsense tricking people with bad taste machine, then it's very hard to go back to that and then creatively direct it to make a different thing for you based on feedback you give it. That's why creativity comes from humans and not a sort of digital mechanical Turk machine that is mainly designed to trick shareholders and people with no training in art or literature. You've made it finally. You sent me into that tunnel and it collapsed. Okay, so we've skipped a bit of story because of the way the demo is structured. I'm quite happy to start off with no story though. Here you are alive. Now what? We had a deal. You're alive for one small favor. What's this favor? A hermit recently died in this valley. Find his body and learn what he was up to for me. A hermit. Outlaws, mages, and monsters possess magic, but a hermit is just a human. They hide in the wilds and steal magic for themselves by dissecting monsters and mages. Okay. So we've learnt this twice now. We've learnt about the hermits twice. I think that's actually a good call, because some people wouldn't have read the book. Even a hermit cannot hide in the woods forever. Now will you find him? One last thing. This hermit was hiding in a ruined castle. Perhaps you can make use of it. I've opened a portal across the field ahead. Now go and begin your search. Alright, I'll do that. We literally just left some sort of castle. I get a feeling you wouldn't build a castle right next to a castle, but... Let me just turn the storm down. There we go. That's less storm now. Sorry about the sound effects, guys. I've got a limiter on the audio, but it doesn't really help if it's a really kind of crackly high frequency noise, because volume and frequency are different things. No, I mean, the other thing about the AI thing, which is, I'm going to say the last thing about it, and then we'll move back to focusing on the game. But the thing about the AI thing is, it's not just about AI, it's about an attitude to game development that AI use is just part of. And there is a sort of attitude on YouTube and certain parts of Reddit, which is just like, we're making games and making games is hard, let's all support each other, making any sort of game is brilliant, blah blah blah. And I kind of agree with that, and that's great, and I think that should exist, but it's not what this channel exists to do, right? I'm not here to encourage new people to start doing game development, or kind of sit here and go, oh, making games is hard, I empathize with how hard it is that you're making games, because that's not interesting to me. Like, it's valid, it should exist somewhere, but it's not what I'm interested in doing. And quite frankly, if I wanted to go back to taking people who have never made a game before and helping them to make a game, I would just go back and get a job in a university where my timetable is organized for me and I get a pension and all of that kind of stuff. I didn't become self-employed and start a YouTube channel so that I could do exactly what I was doing when I worked for a university and spending most of my time interacting with people who go, oh, I can't read the manual for this game engine, so what should I do? And it's like, well, read the manual, learn to read, that kind of thing. Like, I don't want to do that. And that's that whole area of people that have just started learning game dev and want to accelerate as quickly as possible from not being able to do anything to being able to sell something on the internet and being able to sell a game, is just not what I'm interested in at all. The thing is, there's this, and I think the bulk of you who join the chats are in this group, and there's a group of people who are quite competent at doing the thing now, and they need the exposure on their games and the feedback on their games. And every time you make something that is just for beginners, it excludes that group of people that aren't beginners anymore, because they don't need the same stuff as beginners do, right? But the beginners are what is kind of valuable to an algorithmic platform, because it is a larger audience. And that's why I often get people on this channel who come into the comments or come into the chats, don't understand the channel, and because they just sort of see game dev YouTubers as one big ball of stuff, they expect us to all have the same ethos, the same target audience and stuff like that, and they get really peeved and annoyed when I'm pushing for like higher quality or a bit more thought about how mechanics and systems work, because they've been entrained by the algorithm to think that all game dev content is aimed at people who've picked up a game engine in the last year and this is why so many of us make the same content, just targeting the same questions of like, here's the should I make small games debate, here's the which genres are easy to make debate, all of these things. And that is because that is what works on YouTube, because there is always a larger audience of people who are thinking about starting something or have just started it than there is an audience of people who are at the intermediate level. And I've seen this across medias as well, across different mediums. It's the same with music. If you are a musician, there is so much out there for like people who have just started. There's so much content out there. There are so many funds. There are so many like help groups in small towns to like help people who have just started making music. But if you're at the stage where you're kind of semi-professional, if you're at the stage where you're trying to move away from being a skilled hobbyist into doing something at a professional level, that's suddenly where everything drops away and there's no support. And I've seen that in music as well. I've seen it in filmmaking, and I see it in games. And the way that algorithmic platforms work really discourage people from operating at that level. And I say this over and over again. That is the reason why channels like this need funding sources like Patreon to work, because if the Patreon didn't exist for this channel, which is like, you know, some of the people pay into that because they want to be part of the playtest, some of the people just like the video essays and stuff I do so that they help via that way. If the channel wasn't funded that way, it couldn't exist in this format, because I would have to pander to whatever got us the largest amount of views on YouTube, and that would mean every month I would have to do a video on making small games. Every video title would have to include how many copies someone sold, or some kind of like American dream nonsense about following your dreams and making loads of money and selling loads of units, which is not what I'm interested in talking about. It's not a good use of my skills. It's not what I'm passionate about. You know, I think commercial success is something that is the natural result of hard work, learning a trade, learning a craft, and then deliberately investing in projects that use your specific unique set of skills, or the skills of you and your team. It's not the main thing. It's not the thing that people should be drawn to. And the kind of the way that game dev content usually is on YouTube is that is the hook. And you can test this right now. Go and look at Thomas Brush's podcast. Look at the titles of the episodes, look at the thumbnails, and I can guarantee you that at least a third of them will mention how much money someone made or how many copies they made. Sometimes to the point of even not telling you who the developer is. And it will be like a really famous indie developer like Ed McMillan. It'll be like a famous AAA creative director like Ken Levine. The title won't even tell you who that person is. It will lead with how much money they made or what they did. And that's like, I find that morally repugnant. I will just say that very openly. But it also attracts an audience who are not interested in what we're interested in, which is like genuinely getting good at the thing rather than quick hacks to get my first piece of slop on Steam. So for the there's 110 viewers now. I estimate about 30-40 of you are a cold audience who have just come into this channel and you don't know what it's about. That's what this channel is about, and that's why I just muted someone for going on about AI. And it is that attitude. AI is just one of the tools in the toolkit of people that want to make games but see it more as like a just, you know, I do this thing and what I make is what I make, and then I put it on the platform, and then everyone should support me because I'm a small indie developer. It's like, no, get good at the thing. Get good at the thing, care about the thing, and be I think that the thing that I really care about on this channel, and I think that the thing that most of the people that are part of this community care about, is being player centric. Like, you're making a game not to show off. You know, when someone plays your game, they're not interacting with you. They're not thinking about how clever the developer is, or how clever the game design is, or how skilled you are. They're just thinking about whether or not they're having fun. And all of the care and attention you put into your game to making the UX good, making the game design intuitive, is about caring about the player. And like all of the other stuff that people seem to care about, like how many units you sell and you know, starting or following trends, and all of that just naturally emerges from craft, all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, get back to the game for a minute. I'm going to be reading the chat, but I'm going to go to full screen on the game so we can just focus on the game for a bit. The storm has stopped, so I'm going to turn the audio back up. We've got some nice ambient music now. I can do a rail grind on this wall. Excuse me? Okay. I would really like the weapon change to be mapped to the scroll wheel. They've taken half my health. Right, I can't pause and use inventory, so I can't drink a potion. That was quite harsh for like a first piece of proper combat, I think. Yeah, I'm reading the chat. I'm not going to talk on mic anymore about AI today, but feel free to discuss it among yourself. But and I think whether you use it for coding is more of a personal thing, and does it help you or does it make you weak over time, you know, that kind of thing. But very different from player facing stuff and stuff that's part of the creative direction. So I think one of the things that we have this speed bar at the bottom that should be like a quick item thing, but I don't have a way to put something on there. So what I really want is to take this health potion and put it on here, but I can't see a quick way of doing it. I'm gonna drink my potion though. Honestly, I think it's fine for someone to be a pro YouTuber rather than a developer, right? But I do think you... Like, my whole shtick is not, I have made and released an indie game and I can teach you what I know, which is what the shtick usually is. I'm, you know, someone who has worked at various studios as a designer and as a creative lead, and I love indie games. But I'm not like, hey, I'm a successful indie game developer, which is why this channel is about other people's games rather than what I'm working on. But a lot of that comes down to the fact that when you're first making games, the technical side is the big hurdle to get over, right? So people don't acknowledge that a channel like Game Maker's Toolkit is actually a really good game design channel because it's not physically saying this is how to learn Unity. They're like, well, that's the thing I need to learn at this point. And then they don't realize that they actually need to learn game design until much later when they've made a game and no one wants to play it, or people play it and say it's not very good. And then there's another audience that really likes hearing about game design and how games are designed because they love games, but they don't actually intend on making one. They just like thinking about the design, and that's why something like Game Maker's Toolkit can have a very large audience of non-developers. In the same way that you might learn about like literature, but like not have an intention of writing a book because it just sort of enhances your appreciation of that medium. Whereas the stuff that is like, hey, I'm a game developer and you can be too, is doing a different thing, and it usually ends up having to focus on the practicalities of like development rather than the stuff that actually makes a game good, which is design and creative direction, you know? Have you tried right-clicking the slot? So the hotbar, I mean, I can't interact with the hotbar at all when I've got the inventory up. You're awake. Wasn't sure you'd make it. Hill camp close to Gravenstad. Traders sometimes stay out here. I tend the tents and horses for them. Found your line in the road. It's in pretty rough shape, I might add. Brought you back here. Give me my bag. It's at the bottom of the hill there, thanks. Don't mention it. Be more careful. Roads are dangerous round here. You can't click anything when you're in third-person mode because the cursor goes away and you're looking around, which I'm kind of glad for. But yeah, it means that you don't have access to the. You said my bag is at the bottom of the hill. So, I don't know if the dev is in the chat for this one. If you're watching it back, sorry we've had such a long chat about unrelated topics, but hopefully there's quite a lot of UX things in this game that you can see that I'm struggling with, and hopefully that gives you some ideas of things that might be good to fix. I got my sack, but now I can't go back up there, which is a shame because I wanted to get that health potion. I think the combat that we've experienced off the gate, like straight out of getting out of that initial dungeon area, is a little bit too punishing. Like, I want to fight one dude on his own before I fight three dudes, you know, that kind of thing. And it doesn't, this is kind of going to be the problem with this sort of project in general, is like, the feel of the combat doesn't feel good enough in terms of how smooth it is and how responsive it is for me to relish getting beaten up, if that makes sense. Like, if I can just kill a few easy enemies off the bat, and it's less of a how does combat feel thing and more of a like, okay, easy win, kill a few enemies, get some stuff, then I will kind of put up with the combat not feeling as good. Whereas if you immediately throw very difficult combat at me with kind of controls that aren't super responsive, that to me is just gonna make me bounce off of the gameplay quite quickly. And I imagine, again, this is the thing I'm trying to reinforce on this channel. This isn't my advice as a game designer. This is my initial responses as a player, but I can kind of bet that some other people will have the same experience, right? And the thing is, as a game designer, you don't really get... You just get better at articulating things, right? A gamer and a game designer are probably going to have the same responses as they play a game. It's just the general gamer, the playtester, isn't going to be able to articulate those responses in the same way. So when I have these issues with the game and I go, okay, the combat's too hard and the combat maybe should be a little bit more casual to start off with because it doesn't feel cool enough, and you can only really go for ultra punishing Souls-like combat if the combat feels really cool. Then people will be more willing to have that kind of punishing experience. Like, that's the same thing that someone else will experience when they play this game. They just won't necessarily be able to articulate it in that way. Jorgen? I'm Jorgen, a hunter. I was tracking a troll to the east. Best be wary, it's not safe out there. A troll? I killed some armored troop from Eichenwald out here, pursuing bandits. Dangerous creature. Truth is, I was asked to locate it, but it's not really my expertise. I shoot deer, foxes. Maybe I could kill a random creature for you. I mean, the dev said they didn't use AI, so, you know, that's very funny if I muted the dev. It was first time for everything. I mean, you're getting like 200 quid of my consulting time on this, so if you're going to come in and start going on about how devs should use AI, maybe you were joking, but you can't be sarcastic in a text-based medium where like 20 people are talking at the same time. So lesson learned, I guess. I cannot pass sarcasm coming at me in text when lots of different people are speaking, and most people cannot either. Who's this? Is this person going to try and kill me? Are you a friend? You're just walking around with an axe.
What do you need?
I'm going to tell him I'm a hermit. Ah, he's a funny one I see. Call me Yorick. If you need pork, this will be the place. Okay, pork shop. I think that the setting is pulling so much on Skyrim, and that is difficult because it does kind of raise that question of like, what's different?
Just give me a reason, I dare you.
No. Who are you?
I'm sure I'll see you again.
I was wondering if there are any women in this town. There's at least one. Hello.
travels then?
So let's kind of take stock of where we are in this game. I have been given a quest to look for a hermit. How do I get back to my journal? Locate the troll tracks to the east. Search for information about the hermit. Locate Mogwick's portal to the ruined castle. Mog tasked you finding a hermit, a dangerous magic wielding outlaw. Okay. It is giving Two Worlds vibes, yeah. Meat shop? Excuse me, are you the meat man? I'm looking for a hermit, do you know anything? Sure, old fella, long beard, scary guy really, kind of a mess. I've seen him a few times, what do you want to know? Yeah, the UI is good. The UI is one of the strong things. It doesn't always work the way that you would expect. The hotbar is the thing that is bothering me the most, because that has led to a death, right? So that has led to me being in combat, needing to drink a potion. Inventory doesn't pause the game, so I can't pause, drink a potion, then get back to combat. I've got a hotbar which should solve that problem, but I don't have an easy way to put things on the hotbar. And then also this interface for changing what we're holding. You have to use the kind of arrow keys, which isn't a natural mapping. To me, I would use the mouse wheel for that. We've also got like an alternate attack on the mouse wheel click, which I don't know, that might clash if you went in that direction, but herbalist in town might know. Okay, where's the herbalist? And the problem with this kind of game, or trying to make this kind of game well, is you either need to go down the Witcher direction of like a fixed character, or you need to really make the player feel like they're making a particular type of person. And I don't feel like we've really been given the tools to do that. It's just like, so far, the decisions that would feel like anything like role-playing have been dialogue choices that I'm not that interested in yet in the game, because I'm not really invested in the game enough to care about what my character says to people. Or like, what is your loadout? And so far it's just been, do you want to hit people or do you want to shoot them?
Yes.
Again, look at how Skyrim onboards. Between the start of Skyrim and getting out of Helgen, you can decide on your build that you want to play the game with. You can do magic, you can put light armor or heavy armor on, you can decide how you're going to play the game from that point, and you can experiment with those builds in that early part. I don't really feel like we've been given enough tools for that. We've been given like, oh, do you want a hammer or do you want a sword? We haven't been inducted into how magic works in this game. I've seen a skill tree with some magic on, and that to me feels like, okay, either this is a game with a very fixed narrative where you learn certain things in a certain order, which is kind of what they do in like, I don't know, Kingdom Come Deliverance, for example. You're not like making a build straight off the bat. Your character sort of develops as they go on, and then they become a sneaky guy or a armored guy or whatever, or a bit of both. But you really need to do a lot of work to pull people through to that point where they are doing that. And we had character creation at the start that was kind of cosmetic. It's difficult though, because when something is marketed as an RPG, people come to that. That's such a broad genre category that people have different expectations of. And so far it's not really ticking the boxes for me, for what I like from an RPG. It feels more like an action adventure game with some RPG stuff in it, which is what The Witcher is, which is why I'll always bounce off a game like The Witcher more than a game where my character is a blank slate where I get loads of choice about how I like dress them up and what skills they have and stuff like that, which we don't really have here. I'm looking for information about hermits. Well, look elsewhere. You're trying to get us both hanged? Piss off. Okay. The thing is, with a game like this, I'm always really impressed with the work that's been done. But the amount of work I can see that would take this to something that I would actually play out of choice is still loads. And that's because it's just fundamentally not a one-person project. I think people still like that idea of doing that because they know that they'd be proud of all the work they put in and stuff. But people are only impressed by a project being made by one person when it is a project of the same quality as of a game that was made by lots of people. That's kind of the Stardew Valley story, right? Stardew Valley is only impressive because it is actually as good as a Harvest Moon game. So no, people don't go to like solo developed games and go, oh, this is okay for a solo developed game. If it's not good enough, they just don't pay it any attention in the first place. And yeah, and I know that's not like, there's not a thing that has an easy solution, because what I'm basically saying is don't make this game unless you've got a team of between 10 and 100 people, which is kind of the logical conclusion of my argument. But I mean, that is kind of how I feel about it, and that's why, although I would love to make and work on a game like this, like an open world 3D game with lots of player choice and stuff, I would never try to approach that as a solo developer, because it just doesn't fit in the category of things you can do on your own in my head. Just like, you know, making an orchestral piece of music where I play every instrument, it's like that would be a cool thing to do. Yeah, will the end product be anything anyone wants to listen to? Maybe, if they have very insensitive ears, but they probably rather listen to a 100-piece orchestra where everyone can actually play their instrument, you know? So it's like, it's hard with a game like this because I can see how much work has been put into it, and there's nothing super wrong with it. It's just like nothing is like amazing enough to make me want to play it loads, you know? Because I'll just think, well, if I want this experience, there's these other games that are made by a team with a you know, dedicated, competent writer on, are made by a team where there's lots of variety in the art because they've got their own artists, and it just kind of, it comes down to that kind of stuff. I'm famished, so I'm going to eat some carrots. I just, you know, on a very subjective level, I don't feel very motivated to sort of explore this world or learn much about it, because doing the basics of like kind of interacting with things and doing combat doesn't feel very good yet. And I guess if I was trying to kind of come up with some practical advice for the developer of this game, of like what to do with this game if you wanted this game to be financially successful, and have a chance at like having a big audience and being successful, I would just completely remove open world from the thing. And well, no, mate, there's a couple of directions you can go in with this. You go down the route of making it a little bit more linear, like a Souls-like. And when I say Souls-like, I don't mean Elden Ring. I mean like the original Souls games, where you play through relatively linear levels and then they occasionally branch, and you can explore a little bit, but you can't get lost. Or you lean more into the ImSim type thing, which you're kind of doing with this inventory, but you make the combat much more RuneScape-y. And by RuneScape-y, I just mean, don't have that situation where we just get murdered by 3 dudes in the forest very easily and very early. Make the combat much more like fighting one dude at a time, relatively hard to actually die unless you just never heal, you know? make the combat difficulty reliant on like your resource management of your health and your food and stuff like that, rather than how well can you operate the combat. Because like doing the combat and the blocking and everything that I've experienced so far doesn't feel particularly fun. Like my character doesn't feel cool, and all of that comes down to things like animation smoothness. You know, I've said this many times before, in a AAA studio, the 3Cs, camera, character, controls, are so important that they have designers and programmers that just work on that, right? An Assassin's Creed game has designers and technical designers and programmers in a team just doing the camera, character movement and controls, and no other part of the game, and they will work on that aspect of the game for like a 3-year dev cycle. And that is how difficult it is to get that thing to a decent level of polish. And this is one of the reasons why, you know, if you look at all the advice that Chris Sukowski has given over the years, when he says, oh, the games that don't do well on Steam are the games where you control a character and move a character around in the world. It's not because the Steam audience doesn't want those games. It's because that is exceptionally hard to do to the standard of the players of those games, right? So the problem with a game like this is your audience is people who like The Witcher, your audience is people who like Skyrim, and they're going to bring into this game, you know, people that like Souls-likes, they're going to bring into this game all of their expectations of game feel and like how the character feels to operate and move around in the world and the control smoothness. And if the game doesn't match up with those games, I know it's an unfair comparison because that's a AAA game made by a team of 100, but the player doesn't care. The player doesn't care. Even if your game is $5, even if your game is $10, those AAA games are going to be $10 in the sale, and they are going to pick that, right? And this is why the kind of essential quality of an indie game is to do fewer things well rather than to do lots of things, because the games that do lots of things and are able to polish it well enough are AAA games, and you can't make a game with the same breadth of content and the same breadth of features as a AAA game and expect it to do well, because the audience for that will be the people that already play those AAA games, and those will be the points of comparison that they're making. You know, someone will be comparing how your combat feels to a Dark Souls or to a Skyrim, and you know, people make the jokes in the chat earlier that the Skyrim combat's not very good. It still feels better than this, you know. I feel agentic. I feel like if I'm playing Skyrim, I'm thinking about which item I'm using in each hand. I'm thinking about timing. I'm thinking about spatial awareness. In this, I'm whacking the mouse button, and it feels more like a Diablo or a RuneScape type combat from what we've experienced so far. So, you know, it's like for this to release and do well, you need to cut it somewhere. And the cutting might be in the approach to combat. You might have a much simpler, more kind of RuneScape-y approach to combat on purpose rather than by accident, right? Where it's less trying to be Dark Souls and it's more just like you whack a guy 3 times with a sword and you furiously click and they die. And that's the established precedent for how the combat in this game works. Or you kind of cut out the open world stuff and you make it much more like a combat focused game where you focus on polishing the combat, you do less story, and it is much more like, okay, we double down on this kind of Souls-like combat and trying to make that feel good, but we cut out some of the rest of the scope of the game so that we can focus in on that thing. And I think a lot of this fundamentally comes down to that stuff we were talking about earlier about like, what are you good at, right? If you're a developer on your own and you want to have a good game, that is going to be a result of like self-knowledge and knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're not good at. And like, you know, if you want to make a story game, make a game that's mostly just an interactive story. If you want to make an action game, make a game that has a very loosely implied story and doesn't have loads of writing in it. But if you try to do everything, there's going to be some of that stuff that you're going to not be so good at. And with a big project like this, as you work through the project, you should be sort of doing a skills audit on yourself. And as you work through the project going, this part of the game is not very good. People aren't responding very well to it. and I've realized I don't actually like doing it, right? And then that means that at some point you might have to pivot the project and say, well, people say the writing sucks, and actually one of the reasons the writing sucks is I don't enjoy writing, and I don't enjoy sitting down and rewriting all of the writing either when people tell me it sucks. So maybe what I need to do is make this a game that doesn't have a requirement to have loads of writing in it, right? That's the sensible route. Not I'll get ChatGPT to write it, because that doesn't solve the problem, because you're still going to be the person judging the writing that ChatGPT does, right? So one of the issues with making a really big project like this one is at some point in that project you're going to hit a point where you need to analyze the whole project and work out which thing in it to cut, and that's going to require a big degree of self-awareness about what you're doing well. So what this dev is doing well, I would say, the kind of kit bashing of the assets and the making a reasonably beautiful environment is good. We're going to head towards, I'm going to just, so as we're talking, I'm going to head towards that question mark on here. I don't enjoy the dialogue. I don't feel like the dialogue is something that I'm ever going to enjoy in a game like this. It feels like someone kind of doing a loose copy of what they think AAA RPG dialogue would be like. And it puts me off, quite frankly, and I think a lot of people that like these games will be put off by what we can see in the dialogue, both in what the characters are saying and the options that we have. They're not very interesting, expressive options. It's just like, yeah, I'll do what you say, or no, I'll kill you, which, you know, it's kind of what you want in RPGs sometimes, but it feels a bit low effort. I would, you know, the writing feels like one of the weaker skills. The environmental building feels like a stronger skill, but we've also got these big areas where you just sort of get lost, and there's not enough to do for running around in this big environment to feel interesting. You know, I'm not picking flowers. I'm not finding interesting little stashes of things. We're going to do some combat again. I'm going to get bullied by 4 guys. This is just too hard, and I'm not against things being hard, but hard things need to be really rewarding or like cool in some way, and this feels like unnecessarily hard in a way that doesn't make me want to continue playing the game. And I think even people that are like absolute difficulty sickos won't feel sort of inspired by this combat. It feels like losing in the combat is a product of the game just being throwing too much at me early on, rather than like I made bad decisions, right? I mean, maybe that what that combat was trying to teach me is I should run away from combat. Maybe that's what I was supposed to learn from that. Yeah, I think that's the takeaway for anyone, is that you need to be willing to pivot mid-project and make something that still has the same soul of what you were trying to make. You know, it's still probably captured in the same, but not be so bound to like, oh, I said I'm going to do open world, so I've got to do open world now because I said I was going to do open world. It's like, well, if open world is leading you to make something that overall quality is not great, then cut that bit of your spec, you know? This is why, and I've talked about this before, I talked about this in the video about fun, this is why design pillars shouldn't be things like open world or the genre of the game, like platformer or whatever. They should be experiential things, because then you can focus every decision you make on what you're trying to make the player experience. So if your experiential thing is, I want to make the player feel cool, right? Think of like an ImSim like Thief or Deus Ex. The experiential pillars of one of those games is like, I want the player to feel like a sneaky, stealthy, intelligent character, right? You're sneaking around, you're making smart moves to navigate the world, and you're also like hacking things and like solving little environmental puzzles and stuff. It's all based around trying to make the player feel a certain way. Whereas because this game is based around a set of sort of like impressive marketing words, like it's open world, or you know, it's it's got all of these quests or whatever. That might be something that a player picks off of a Steam marketplace and goes, oh, I like open world games. But it's not going to be the thing that actually holds them in the game or brings them back to it, right? The thing that is going to make the game actually good to experience is going to be like how focused it is on doing a particular type of thing. And so far we've got a combat driven game where the combat isn't very fun, and I'm sort of more motivated to run away from the combat than to engage in it, because some of that might just be balancing. It might just be that your early game characters need to die in 2 whacks, right? And this is what I was saying about, it feels a bit like an empty single player MMO, right? And if you're absolutely dead set on this being an open world game, maybe just make the combat much, much easier, so it's less about exercising a reaction skill of like attacking and blocking, because nothing here is smooth enough for this to rival how The Witcher feels. You know, it feels kind of almost like The Witcher 1 on some level, but that's not the standard anymore. It's never going to feel great unless you really invest a lot of time and effort into that thing of being like a reaction-based game about attacking and blocking. So what you can make it instead is the individual combat elements are quite easy and don't require much skill, and it is much more about, I'm getting attacked during dialogue now, much more about like just farming enemies for things, right? And then you're going more in the direction of it being like a single player MMO RuneScape type thing. That's kind of the mature way of approaching a project at this stage, is just taking stock of it and going, okay, what's actually working here? What can we do well? Okay, the feel of the combat isn't particularly good, and the sort of skill checks I'm throwing at the player in terms of can you do the combat are just resulting in them feeling frustrated rather than motivated to try again. Maybe we make the combat way easier, and then it's much more about like managing your inventory and making sure you've got enough health potions, and you know, that's kind of how the progression in things like Slay the Spire works as well. It's like, it's more about how much chip damage can you avoid rather than like how skillfully are you executing every single little turn, which is more what a kind of very skill-based Souls-like action RPG does, where it's like, you know, anyone that hits you a couple of times is going to kill you. That really only works if the combat feels really, really nice to do. Who are these? Nemins. What are you? Nemin. See, this is charming. I like this. I like a weird little guy. I want a hat. I want a lemon hat. I need some health potions. I'm gonna give you some berries. Berries. Give these big flowers taking up my whole inventory. You can have one of these. You can have this. I don't care about any of this stuff. You can have my arrows because I don't care about my bow. You can have all my torches. I just want a hat. I just want a hat, man. There isn't a way to split stacks of like inventory elements either, which feels like a... Oh, I can't afford a hat. Yeah, the inventory feels underdeveloped for something that is a very core feature. Like, we can't... There isn't a quick way to split... Oh no, shift... Split stacks. There we go. We can split the stacks. Give me that. You take that. I buy that. I'll take that back. I'll sell you some coins. That doesn't work. The world keeps going in the background when those menus are up, which is not great either, because you just come back and you're dead. I honestly, you know, this is one of these tests where I feel more like I'm doing QA than analyzing the game design, because so many of the problems that we've had so far are just like something doesn't have a button. And to be totally fair to the dev, you sent an email that explained some of that, but the issue, you know, particularly when you're going onto Steam and you've got an audience who are gamers rather than other hobbyist developers, I always say, you know, test your games on itch first, because people there are way more forgiving of a game being jank, because there are way more game dev hobbyists on itch rather than people who genuinely just want to play a game and see if they want to buy it later on. Don't use a Steam demo to do testing that is essentially QA, because the more issues you leave in the game that you know are issues, the more of a waste the test will be, because a lot of the information you get back will be focused on things you're already aware of. And this feels like it's a game that's sort of dressed up to look like everything is at final quality. And we were having this discussion in the Discord this morning, and someone was saying, like, what level of polish should an alpha be at? And I was saying, an alpha, you know, like first play tests with people outside of your team, I would go for the parts of the game which are crucial to the experience, like how the character moves and stuff like that, and the main mechanics should be polished to actually show what the game will be like. And then anything that's placeholder should be obviously placeholder. So when we did the Dirt World alpha in December, it was like a lot of the elements of the game were kind of like, I'm happy with this. If this was in the final game, I don't mind. If this is what the character looks like, if this is what the environment looks like, if this is what this VFX looks like, I'm happy with that. But the pause menu, for example, was very clearly placeholder. It wasn't like MVP that will do for now. It was like deliberately ugly, I would say, because we would just like, look, you need a pause menu because you need to be able to go and change the volume, but this is not what the pause menu will look like. Whereas this feels more like every part of the game is trying to look like what it would look like in a release candidate. And that means that the information you'll get from a playtest will be almost, you know, people will treat it like it's a finished game and they're leaving a Steam review, you know. This didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work, and it ends up being less of a game design playtest where you're trying to work out what people think is fun about the game, and more of just QA of just like people pointing out bugs, and a lot of the bugs you knew about. And the problem is that you put them in a game that looked like a finished game, and now people recognize them as bugs rather than like just something you haven't got around to yet, which is why it's really important for placeholder things in builds of games to look like placeholder, because then people don't expect them to work properly. As soon as something has the appearance of like a proper polished piece of UI or a proper polished piece of world art or something, then people expect it to behave properly. You raise the expectations of the functionality of the thing by raising the kind of aesthetic quality of it, because we sort of make links between those things in our heads. If something is just a big pink box and you've told people the game is unfinished, then they're going to see the big pink box and they're going to go, oh, that's because the game's unfinished. Whereas if it looks like a beautiful asset that's from a finished game, it doesn't work the way they'd expect it to, they're going to think, well, that's a horse, so that should behave like a horse, you know, that kind of thing. Okay, it's time to do crime. I'm going to have one more go at murdering that town, and then we're going to wrap it up for today, because I feel like I'm being an overly negative Nelly today. But hopefully it's been helpful to people, useful to people, validating for some of you if this game is kind of showing you some sort of things that you want to avoid, or are actively trying to avoid. Because I think deep down all of us would like to work on a big immersive game and create a world. You know, it's one of the appeals of game dev. And then as you sort of learn what you can do and can't do and your limitations, if you're not working at a studio and your intention is to work on your own, at some point you kind of bite the bullet and you go, well, I need to scale back what I'm doing. This is a game that hasn't done that yet. It's still trying to do all of the things that it initially set out to do. And I hope that this playtest or other ones like it will show the dev that there are things that they're doing well and there's things that they're not doing well, and the solution to that is to probably focus in on the strengths and cut some of the weaknesses. And that happens at like every level of the industry. The classic one that you hear about Bethesda is they've never got horse riding to work very well, and part of that is because of technical issues. They can't make the horse move fast enough, and the load in for art assets to. So if they make the horse move fast enough for the game to feel good, the selective loading that they've got for the art assets in the distance can't keep up with the speed of the horse, right? So rather, they leave horse riding in because it's a fantasy medieval game and people want to ride a horse, but they deliberately don't make quests about horse riding. They push it to the edge of the design, right? So you've got your design space, which is fantasy RPG where you can go anywhere and do anything, but there's an element of the design that isn't working, so you cut it or you push it to the edge and you say this isn't that important, so we're not going to do it all the time. We'll leave it in here because players want it, but we're not going to like make it mandatory or make it something that you're doing all the time. It happens to everyone. It happens to big studios, but as a developer working on your own, you have to be super sensitive to it. And I like, if anyone is new to the channel, I hope you understand. I can see that lots of care and attention and love has gone into this project, and I'm not belittling it and saying, oh, this is crap, you know, throw it all away, start again. I'm saying that if you want all of that work to pay off in something that people actually enjoy and want to play and don't just immediately bounce off of, you probably need to pivot this project towards the things that it's doing well and away from the things that it's not doing well. Okay, let's try and archer this guy. I don't think I've got any arrows. Lets me equip the bow when I don't have any arrows. Okay, we're gonna have one more earnest attempt at combat. At least there's only one guy this time. And I know I've got like the frame rate turned down and stuff, so there's probably just stuff about this combat that doesn't look as good as it might do, but it's really the feel type stuff. Like, I spend a lot of time spamming the mouse button. And my character is starving, so I have like 1 health. Right, exactly, yeah, it's just too much for one person to execute well. And again, that's fine if it's a hobby. You're doing it as a hobby. I feel like we almost just, people need to make games like this and put them on itch. Itch is a hobbyist platform where you can sell games, right? Steam is a commercial platform full of hobbyists. And there's just something about the messaging of putting something on Steam where it's just, I feel like once you set up a Steam page, you've kind of committed to the world that you've moved out of pre-production, you've prototyped a game, you've tested the idea, and now you're on Steam to say, hey, this is the game we're making, right? Because it's a product page for a commercial release of a game. And it just doesn't have that vibe. And I feel like even if you use Steam playtest and you say it's a playtest, the expectation is still that, you know, you're on a commercial platform and you've said this is the game you're going to make. So you're not necessarily, and this is me reading into things, but it's also based on lots and lots of experience with people, is that I feel like once people set up a Steam page, it's like they are deep into the kind of sunk cost fallacy world of, this is definitely what I'm going to make and I'm not going to hard pivot away from it now. And what did I just eat? I discovered lots of recipes by eating it. Is that because we've got like an alchemy system that's similar to Elder Scrolls? It's just so many systems that you need for a game like this to really feel right. I'm starving. I need to eat something. Both in the game and in the real world. Do you have any food for me, strange people with a cool hat? I like the Nemin. These guys are a vibe. I approve of them. But will you trade me some food? Trade? You don't have any good food. Is that a food? Where have my tooltips gone? A fish? Give me fish. I'll give you a shield. Yeah, can't afford anything. I just want your hat. You should be able to like quit out of this quickly and cancel the trade as well. Why would you have this remove the items before leaving message when, so that means you've clearly acknowledged someone's trying to leave. Just let them quit and take all of the things out automatically. Who cannot switch loadouts so quickly? Hello? I'm drunk. Yeah, exactly. I feel like there's loads of things in this game that could end up being a good game, but some of the other things need to go away. The combat doesn't feel nice enough on its own for it to be a game predominantly about the combat. They put so much work into building this world, and the world looks beautiful, so I wouldn't want to throw that away. So I really think just making the combat and like the hot combat and healing and stuff a lot less punishing, because it's been quite hard to. It keeps like loading me from a checkpoint. Let me just go way back. Keeps kind of bringing me back in from a checkpoint with low health and low food or whatever, rather than loading up a save. And that's kind of creating an annoying experience as well, because I could manually load the save back, but it's almost like the game is suggesting, no, this is Souls-like, you die and then you go back into the. But I've already at a disadvantage now because I've respawned with my health really low and no food and stuff that's maybe in my inventory but not in my equipment, but not in my inventory. That's happening a fair bit as well. So yeah, if we were going to try and fix this game, I would try and pivot to making the running around killing things just way easier, like 500% easier, and then you've got a chance. And part of this, I'm thinking a little bit cynically here, part of it would be people who this is their first open world action RPG, right? So they're not coming to it with the expectation of what a Souls-like feels like or what The Witcher feels like or anything like that. But you're only going to get those if you make it really easy and casual. And if you make the UX of this inventory feel really good. Right? And you make the combat way easier. And I think if we're comparing to Skyrim, which is very hard not to, given what this game looks like, I think one of the things you need to acknowledge about Skyrim when it came out was that it was pushing in the direction of being a sort of more casual mid-core game. That's one of the reasons why Skyrim doesn't have spellcrafting in, whereas Oblivion did. Oblivion had this whole system where you could build your own spells. It was really cool. I was really gutted when they didn't have it in Skyrim. It's because they were pushing for more of a bro gamer audience. That's the reason why the marketing was all muscle dude with a Viking helmet on and not sneaky dude or wizard as well, because as soon as you start doing your marketing around a wizard or a sneaky dude, people think that the game is going to be more about intellectual problem solving, like stealth games, right? Stealth games are a little bit more about intellectual problem solving and a little bit less about reactions and power fantasy. I mean, you've got two guys. I don't want any trouble. So I would imagine your target audience for this as being a sort of 10, 11, 12-year-old who's never played one of these games, and you want to make it really simple and accessible for them. Okay, we make it so that our player character is a bullet sponge. We make it so you do have to feed your character, but it takes a long time for them to get hungry. We make it so most characters go down in 2 or 3 chops, and there isn't really, you can still have your block mechanic, but don't make it as crucial. Make it a lot more forgiving. And then people will just generally have a better time in the game, right? And that is the thing, we talk about this a lot with onboarding. onboarding in a game isn't just tutorializing the game, it's making sure people have fun with it as fast as possible. Because if people have fun in their first time user experience, they're going to want to continue playing the game. Whereas if people spend their first time user experience getting lost or just like getting beaten by enemies that seem way too powerful for the early part of a game, they're not going to have a good time and they're not going to want to keep playing. The only games that can get away with that is like the start of Dark Souls where the boss kills you, but even then that's treated as a story moment and then you move on from it. They don't start with an unbeatable boss and then kill you with it 10 times. They kill you with it, and that sort of indicates this is a harsh, dark game. And then you're teleported somewhere else and you fight some really easy enemies and you start to feel good about yourself again, right? I would, if you want to keep this design as close as it is, as close to what it is now, and you don't want to deviate from trying to make this big open world action RPG with these kind of sim elements and picking up items and crafting and all of that stuff, and you want to kind of do all of that work and make this a good game despite that really overly ambitious kind of brief you've given yourself, then focus on making the player feel a bit more powerful early on, and just giving the player a good time. You know, first hour of the game, make it harder to get lost, make it harder to die. And then later on in the game, you can ramp it up as much as you want. You can have the 12 dudes trying to kill the player, all of that stuff. But the game feel of the combat and the responsiveness of the blocking and all of those things don't feel good enough for someone who is like a veteran of this genre to want to endure getting beaten up loads and loads and trying to get better at the game. Just not like an incentive that fits with how the game kind of currently feels and the direction it's going in. I steal your armor. I inspect your skull. It's a 5x5 skull. We can do some medieval phrenology here. 5x5, 3 kilograms, worth 4pence. So someone in the chat asked if a game like this is a good portfolio piece. That's a really good question. So Sean in the chat, I don't know if you're all right with me introducing you, but Sean has worked on like quite a few AAA games as a level designer, and I believe other roles as well. So will have been, I don't know, Sean, if you've done hiring manager stuff. I've done hiring manager I've been a hiring manager for other designers, for QA people, for producer, and for programmers, I think, in the kind of games as service studio places I worked in. And I think it depends what you're hiring for. I think early on, when you've got a small team, early on you want Swiss Army knife type people who can do a bit of everything. And then as the team gets bigger, you usually want people a bit more dedicated. The thing, Sean said that this kind of game would maybe not be the best thing to show because it shows a little bit of everything, and that means that maybe it's almost like as a set of skills you're showing the studio that you're ultra junior at lots of different things, whereas most of the time you want people with what they call a T-shaped skill set, right? Like a shallow knowledge of everything and a deep knowledge of one thing, right? Whereas like when I play this, I can't see like any one aspect of the game feeling really deep. Like it's not, it wouldn't be a good portfolio piece for like a combat programmer or a technical designer for combat. It wouldn't be a good I mean, the UI is okay, but if you were going to give people this to interact with, like it looks visually okay. I imagine that this is all from some sort of like 9-sliced set of things, like some sort of asset pack, which is fine. I don't mind that. But it doesn't show one particular skill very strongly, and in a larger studio, you don't always want to hire lots of people like that because they don't, to put it really frankly, they don't stay in their lane. They want to be involved in loads of little things, and it's not even just a skill set thing. It's like what sort of drives and interests does this person have. If someone is like a character artist and that's all they care about and that's all they have in their portfolio, then you can hire them as a character artist, and they're not going to suddenly start getting involved in things that you haven't hired them to, because you get like too many cooks in certain parts of your game if everyone has an opinion about it. Yeah, Stefan, I think the atmosphere, it's beautiful. It's really, really lovely, and it looks like a real place. I think that the way that the environment has been built is really, really nice. I think I like a big, and maybe Sean sort of has some opinions about this, like a bigger kind of level design. When you're doing like open world level design like this, you sort of want to be able to look in different directions and have a loose idea of what's over there. Whereas this is like a valley where everything is white mountains in every direction, right? And that's when you need to start thinking about like, okay, maybe the kind of grass gradates from one color to another in one direction or whatever. Oh, it's a Spriggan. Hello, Spriggan. I'm going to murder you. Maybe there's a mountain that's a very particular, unusual shape that is like the only mountain that shape, and it's over in one direction. You kind of need some of those kind of navigational tools so that people can get a sense of the world. But we do have a compass and everything like that, and we'll have a look at the map in a minute as well and see if. I feel like we've got so many tracks on this stream that we haven't really explored every part of the game. But I try and take a game as it is, and if there's stuff in the game that is just fundamentally putting me off, then I'm not going to like scour every part of the game looking for good things to talk about. If a game's map is fantastic but it's a combat heavy game and I'm not enjoying the combat, then I'm not going to like spend ages praising the map. Let's just kill these dudes and then I'll just check the chat again. Yeah, I think Diogo, when you're doing map design, I was talking about earlier about how you do it in D&D, which is like, how would you verbally describe it first? Like, to the north is one of these, to the east is this, over to the west, it becomes more of a swamp, right? And if you can verbally describe it before you start building it, before you start putting assets into the environment, then what you're describing is actually the kind of map that the player will make of the environment as they learn it and start to navigate. Oh, there's the swamp over there, and there's the frosty mountains over there, and over there is like that old war zone with all of the craters in the ground from the Mage Wars or whatever happened in the lore of your game, right? And if you can verbally describe it first before you start putting any assets anywhere, then you're gonna like make your job a lot easier. Because otherwise it's very tempting to just make this is a really beautiful place. It's a very good like simulation of a pretty place. But I look around there, I go, ooh, I wanna see what's up that river. I don't want to fight these guys, they're too hard. So we're gonna just run away from them. Although no one ever, as someone pointed out earlier, no one ever stops aggroing when you run away from them for a long time, which is unfortunate. I don't really know a single kind of action RPG where characters won't eventually give up chasing you. Oh no, they did that time. That was good. Yeah, landmarks. Yeah, I had a moment there where I saw that corner and I was like, oh, I want to see what's up that river, and then I go up there and it's sort of just unrewarding. The way I would think about it is like you need to think about like your game areas as an abstract playground of like, oh, you go up there and then you can see down there, and then if you go up there, then those enemies down there, you can see them from above and you can just fight them from above, and you're not thinking about like what anything is in terms of like the real world. And then later on you start to think about the story that the environment tells, and you go, okay, well, we want that option where you can sneak up and get the elevation, so that will be a cliff, whereas if you just go down the route of trying to make a real looking place first, then you're gonna like not make something that is intriguing to play with because you haven't thought of it as a playground first. And that's why we do grey boxing as well. That's why we do kind of level design with placeholder and grey boxing and stuff, so that you don't get pulled into this trap of trying to make a beautiful simulation of a real place before you've worked out what's fun. Are you friends? Are you good? Everyone is enemies everywhere. Camp of rogues. I don't know if someone was joking when they said that the person I put in timeout was the dev. That would be very, very funny if it was. Dev, if you're watching this back or you're still watching the stream, if that was you, sorry I put you in timeout, but... Anyone who's just joined. I put someone in timeout earlier because I was sick of talking about AI, and then it made me talk about AI for ages. So, sorry about that. Oh, the extreme weather sounds are coming back in. It would be hilarious. It feels a little bit rude though, but I mean, if it was the dev, kind of funny. First time for everything, hasn't happened before. If it was the dev and you were being sarcastic about using AI and you didn't actually mean that you would use AI, then yeah, sorry, sarcasm just doesn't travel very well in text with people you've never met before. Both of those things are not good modifiers on sarcasm. Doing it in text, doing it to someone you don't know, bad combo. If you're if you were not if you were serious about using AI because you're on a budget, then I don't care if you were the dev or not. It's not the ethos of this channel. You know, make what you're capable of making on your own. If you insist on working on your own, if you have bigger ambitions than that, then work with people, not with the random content slot machine. Really bad timing. If so, yeah. Oh, I'll get angry email next. I think we've been pretty fair to this game. I think there are things that this game is doing doing okay at. And I think you can kind of carry on making exactly what you're making here, and it's not going to make a big splash, or you can narrow it down to something a little bit more specific and it could do really well. I think that's the main takeaway here, really. This is at a stage in the project where it needs to de-scope in some sort of direction. And like I said, I think the easiest win on this would just be to make the combat way easier and more casual feeling. Like anything that is a traditional, like a very bog standard enemy in a fantasy game, like a wolf or a bat or a human that isn't some legend, should just be like 10 HP, whack, 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 dead. And then you at least have something where people are going to have a good time. Diego, they haven't said anything about using AI in this game. I was told in the email they weren't using AI. It was just a comment they made about how... The comment this person made, who may or may not have been the dev. I don't know if the person who said it was the dev was joking. That's the amount of health that an enemy should have, and they should do about half as much damage as that. Yeah, it was just some comment about like someone saying they might need to use AI if they did X, Y, or Z because they're on a budget. Like, well, make something different then. Plain said if you had this base, you'd go towards more of an exploration-based game. Yeah, totally. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at with the kind of RuneScapification of the combat, right? Like, the enemies should just be there to punctuate the exploring the world rather than to provide a real challenge. Because the players that really want a sicko combat challenge aren't going to settle for the combat feeling the way that this combat does. Right? Whereas the players that want a more casual, meander around, learn a bit of story, explore the environment, they're not going to want to get murdered by 3 dudes with swords who look like they should be easy. just the skill requirement for the combat is too high for the type of people who are going to be attracted to this kind of wandering around picking flowers type world that we've got here. I think. I'm going to wrap it up there, I think, folks. I think if you like the look of this, you should go and play it yourself and check it out, as always. It's just a game that's very intent on killing me, and the thing that I need to do to not get killed is not enjoyable enough. I think that's the biggest problem with this at this moment. There's lots of little problems. You know, we can go through the menus. We can say, "Oh, why can't I put things on the hotbar? Why can't I, you know, why is it so hard to work out how to split stacks?" All of those little UX things with the interface, and the fact that it doesn't pause when you go to the inventory, which is like, I don't know, Skyrim pauses when you go to the inventory, and this feels like pitched at the same level. You know, the only games where we don't get to pause are super hardcore combat focused beat 'em ups. There's all of those little UX things that we could nitpick, and I already have, and those would be things that I would put in my backlog as a developer and say, these are things I will fix eventually. But the core of the game for me is just that there's too much difficult combat, and that doesn't really fit with what the rest of the game is getting at, or the strengths of the rest of the game, which is just like a beautiful big world to explore. Here's the map. Where am I on the map? Where am I? Is that... Why can I not see where I am? Am I just being a dumbass? I mean, I'm very tired at this point, so... Discs in the chat said the RPG and dialogue. Yeah, I mean, I would put it this way: like, the RPG, the content for the writing is moderately competent. It's not good enough for it to be an actual draw of the game. You know, people who don't like fighting games will play a game like The Witcher because the writing is so good. It's the same for Cyberpunk as well. Like, CD Projekt Red are so good at writing that people who do not even play that genre of game will learn the combat and do the kind of casual story version of the game because they like the writing and the story and the world building so much. There's been a lot of thought gone into the world building here. You know, we've got this idea of like, there's this type of bad guy called a hermit. They do this weird magical thing that people disapprove of, and we're going to learn about that, and we're going to learn whether or not they're really bad guys. And the game has given us a sort of, you know, hero's journey call to action type thing where it's set us up in this demo straight away to be looking for a hermit. So it's got a very clear narrative remit of what it's doing there. But all of the interactions with the NPCs in the town, we had a little bit of reinforcement of that, like the guy that was like, don't talk to me about hermits. There's not really been any pieces of writing that really charmed me here. It takes itself quite seriously. There's nothing that's really kind of made me laugh or made me feel for a character or made me think, oh, this is a character I care about. So the writing's not really doing much in terms of character work. And the writing that does exist that's good, which is like establishing the setting, establishing the thing that the character is trying to do, the goals of the player, that's all stuff you could do in a game that doesn't really have dialogue, right? You could have a beat 'em up, or like a game where there's not loads of characters in the world talking to you, and still have the story of like, you need to go and find the weird wizard that lives in the wood and work out if they're a bad guy, you know? So the story, I guess what I'm talking about here is like a mismatch between the story that the game wants to tell and the narrative devices that it's using, right? So narrative devices are a thing that a story does to tell the story. So in a film, narrative devices could be things like a voiceover, it could be a flashback, It could be having a character read a letter out. Those are all narrative devices. They're like little methods for telling the story. In video games, we have narrative devices that fit within a genre that are expected. So in a certain type of RPG, we expect that you can walk up to characters and they will talk to you, right? We will expect that you can pick up a note and read about what happened in that note. And the problem with making certain genres is that players then expect them to have those narrative devices in. So when I see this game, I expect that I'm going to be like walking around and like talking to a bunch of characters and learning about the world from them. And then that creates the need for that writing to be good. And that's another problem with working in this genre. We talked about this at the start. It's like, if you're making this type of game, you need to be able to write well. And you need to, and a part of that is enjoying doing the writing. And at least here, it feels like the dev has enjoyed writing all this dialogue, or has enjoyed having these characters to write. I've played games like this before, where I think it was Geoland or something like that. Was it Geoland? Like last year, where you had all these JRPG style characters dotted around the world who had a line to say to you. And the game had been in development for years and years, and the dev had still left placeholder dialogue in some of them. And that was like a case of like, okay, you've decided to make a type of game where you just don't enjoy doing one of the things that this game requires, right? Whereas at least here, it feels like the developer maybe enjoyed doing the writing for those characters. And the first step of getting good at a skill is enjoying trying to do it, right? Whereas if you set out to make this game and you started to populate the world with characters, give them things to say, and you thought, I really don't like doing this, then that's an insight that you either need to get someone else to do that, or you need to make a game that doesn't have that requirement, right? And that's also a genre difference between like a hack and slash beat 'em up like a Diablo or a Dark Souls and an open world RPG, because in an RPG, our expectation as a player is that part of the role playing here is embodying a character in a social world, you know. So I'm going to be a guy in the Thieves Guild, but I'm going to be a good thief. I'm going to be in the Thieves Guild, and I'm also going to help people out and solve crimes. I'm going to be like Batman, right? So you make that decision about what type of character you're going to play, and the interactions that are possible in the social world of the game allow you to play out that character. Just like in Fallout, you can like, I'm going to be a cowboy, and I'm going to follow a cowboy code, and then the dialogue options and everything allow you to do that. It feels like what we've got here is like dialogue options that are just agree to do the thing or be a jerk, which is not a bad place to start, right? But it doesn't really give you the full expressive range for this to feel like an RPG. Whereas something that is more like Dark Souls or Diablo, it's like there are characters who you talk to, and the interaction you have with them is one way. So if you go around the town in Diablo, your character is like a combat avatar in Diablo. You know, they look cool. You've decided whether you're going to be a barbarian or a wizard or a witch hunter or whatever, but you're not, the character is a silent protagonist. You're not expressing yourself through the character. You don't have any sort of role in that social world in a Diablo or, you know, in a Dark Souls. You're just like a doll that you dress up and you do combat with, and then other characters in the world are there to talk to you. Now, the expectation this game is setting up is your character actually has something to say, and you choose dialogue options. And that, again, is taking us further and further into the realm of, in order for this to work, the writing needs to be really good. Whereas if we went more in the direction of like, your character doesn't speak and characters just talk at you like they do in Zelda or they do in Diablo, then we're basically lowering the skill requirement for the writing for this game, because we're not having to think about how does the player express themselves and role play through their dialogue choices, which is like A-tier video game narrative design, compared to, you know, a Zelda, a Diablo, a Dark Souls, where characters exist in the world and they talk to you, but you very, very rarely make decisions about what your character says back. And if you do, it's just making a choice about whether to do something or not. And it's just accept or decline, that kind of thing. I would think about maybe bringing the storytelling back down to that level, so that this can kind of be more of an exploration focused game, more of a kind of casual combat with farming for parts type game. Again, like a more of a single player MMO, more of a kind of RuneScape-y experience. Because as soon as you go in that direction of like, I can pick the dialogue options, now we're in the space of this being like a quote unquote true role-playing game where you're deciding what type of character you're embodying as the player, not just like as their clothes and what moves they can do like an action RPG, but as an actual like social participant in the game world. And I think that's the thing that makes the quote unquote bad writing stick out more, is if you're sort of expecting the player to actually role play as a character rather than just choose a loadout and a dress up and then decide whether to accept or decline quests, which would make the writing requirement much simpler for this game. Thanks, Chris. I'll have a look at that afterwards. I did half an hour session before this stream trying to adjust the audio and self-recording, and yesterday I did the same thing. So every day I sit down to stream, I've got a new interface. It's not a new mic, it's a new interface, so I've had to set up everything up from scratch, and I've been spending time before the streams trying to adjust the compressors and the noise gates and stuff, and it's just really hard to get right. And it's partly because I get more animated during a stream, and then when I test I'm not speaking that way, so I will get it fixed over the next week or so. It's such a pain in the ass. Yeah, it really needs to be a it just works thing, but it's the mix of people having different voices and audio being subjective that means that you have to just keep tweaking it forever and ever and ever. Right, I am going to log off and do some game dev stuff. Thank you all for joining today. I will maybe go back through the VOD and put some timestamps on this, but honestly, we've been all over the place today. We've talked about lots of things. Oh look, this is what you want in an open world game. More of this. Stumbling across other factions fighting. Have a good day, folks. How's the game going? I have been on hiatus from working on my own game. I've done some documentation and I've done some like direction with the other programmer and like giving them feedback on stuff they're doing, but hopefully get more stuck into it next week. Yeah, it's been a quiet month on that, but see you all later.